Hello, and welcome to what might be the most controversial ranking you'll watch this year, the top 20 rock bands of the 1970s. Now, before the comment section explodes, let's be clear about something. This isn't a list of the most popular bands, nor is it about which acts sold the most records or influenced the most musicians. This ranking is based purely on one criterion: the quality of studio albums released between 1970 and 1979. We're talking about artistic achievement, consistency, innovation, and the sheer brilliance captured on vinyl during rock's most creative decade. Some legendary names might be lower than you expect, while some cult favorites might surprise you with their placement. The 1970s gave us an embarrassment of riches: progressive epics, hard rock thunder, and sonic experiments that still sound fresh today. So buckle up, because we're about to journey through the decade that defined what rock music could be. Let's begin. Kicking off our ranking at number 20, it's Budgie, the criminally underrated Welsh power trio that influenced Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Soundgarden, yet somehow never got the recognition they deserved. Their self-titled debut in 1971 introduced their formula: heavy riffs, soaring vocals, and song titles longer than most bands' biographies. Squawk later in 1971 and Never Turn Your Back on a Friend in 1973 refined their sound, with tracks like Bread Fan becoming classics that Metallica would later cover. In for the Kill in 1974 and Bandolier in 1975 showed them at their heaviest, while If I Were Britannia, I'd Waive the Rules in 1976 demonstrated their quirky side. Impeccable arrived in 1978, maintaining their commitment to powerful, riff-driven rock. Throughout the decade, Budgie combined proto-metal heaviness with progressive tendencies and a uniquely Welsh charm. Burke Shelley's distinctive vocals and bass work, combined with their massive guitar sound, created something that was ahead of its time. They never achieved mainstream success, but their influence on heavy metal is undeniable. Budgie proved that you didn't need to be from London or Birmingham to create earth-shaking heavy rock. Cardiff worked just fine. At number 19, it's Queen, the band that took rock's theatricality to operatic heights and made it look effortless. Freddie Mercury's vision and Brian May's guitar made them impossible to ignore. Their self-titled debut in 1973 hinted at greatness, while Queen 2 in 1974 showcased their ambition with its white and black sides concept. Sheer Heart Attack, later in 1974, gave us Killer Queen and proved they could write hit singles. Then came A Night at the Opera in 1975, their masterpiece. Bohemian Rhapsody was 6 minutes of pure audacity that became one of rock's most iconic songs. The album showed Queen at their most adventurous, blending opera, metal, music hall, and pop seamlessly. A Day at the Races in 1976 continued their hot streak, while News of the World in 1977 gave us the stadium anthems We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, songs that will echo in sports arenas forever. Jazz arrived in 1978, showing their playful and experimental side with tracks ranging from rockabilly to funk. Queen's 70s run was about fearless genre blending and refusing to be confined. They proved that rock could be camp, operatic, heavy, and pop, sometimes all in the same song. Their influence on theatrical rock is immeasurable. At number 18, it's The Who, the band that had already changed rock forever by 1970 and spent the decade proving they could do it again. Pete Townshend's ambitions knew no bounds. No one knows what it's like to feel these feelings. Who's Next arrived in 1971, salvaged from the abandoned Lifehouse project. It gave us Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, synthesizer-driven anthems that became rock staples. This album proved The Who could create stadium-sized songs without losing their edge. Quadrophenia came in 1973, a double-album rock opera about a mod's identity crisis. It was ambitious, deeply personal, and quintessentially British. Townshend's response to those who thought Tommy was his peak. The Who by Numbers in 1975 was darker and more introspective, reflecting the band's internal struggles. Then came Who Are You in 1978, their final album with Keith Moon, whose death shortly after release marked the end of an era. The Who's 70s output showed a band grappling with success, aging, and artistic ambition. Townshend's synthesizer experiments, Daltrey's powerful vocals, Entwistle's melodic bass, and Moon's chaotic drumming created music that was both intellectual and visceral. They proved that arena rock could have depth, and that rock opera was worth pursuing. At number 17, it's Wishbone Ash, the band that pioneered twin-lead guitar harmonies and proved that melody could be as powerful as volume. They influenced everyone from Iron Maiden to Thin Lizzy. Their self-titled debut in 1970 introduced their signature sound, but Pilgrimage in 1971 refined it. Then came Argus in 1972, their masterpiece. This concept album about a medieval warrior showcased Andy Powell and Ted Turner's interweaving guitar work at its finest, creating textures that were both intricate and accessible. Wishbone 4 in 1973 and There's the Rub in 1974 maintained their momentum, though lineup changes began affecting their chemistry. Locked in 1976 saw them experimenting with a harder American sound, while New England in 1976 and Front Page News in 1977 continued their evolutions. No Smoke Without Fire arrived in 1978, showing a band still exploring but struggling to recapture their early 70s magic. Wishbone Ash never achieved superstar status, but their influence is undeniable. Those twin guitar harmonies became a blueprint for countless bands. They proved that technical skill and melodic sensibility weren't mutually exclusive, creating a sound that was progressive without being pretentious, heavy without being brutal. At number 16, it's Santana, the band that fused Latin rhythms, rock guitar, and jazz improvisation into something entirely unique. Carlos Santana's guitar tone became one of rock's most recognizable voices. Abraxas kicked off the decade in 1970, giving us Black Magic Woman and Oye Como Va, Latin rock perfection. Santana 3 in 1971 featured a powerhouse lineup with Neil Schon and Greg Rowley, creating some of their heaviest work. Caravanserai in 1972 shifted dramatically toward jazz fusion, confusing fans but showcasing Carlos's spiritual and musical evolution. Welcome in 1973, Borboleta in 1974, and Amigos in 1976 continued exploring this jazzier, more experimental territory. Festival in 1977 and Moonflower in 1977 brought back some of the Latin rock energy, while Inner Secrets in 1978 and Marathon in 1979 saw them attempting more commercial sounds with mixed results. Santana's 70s journey was about constant reinvention. While the early albums defined Latin rock, Carlos's spiritual quest led him through jazz fusion and beyond. The revolving door of musicians meant the sound constantly evolved, but Carlos's singing guitar remained the constant. His ability to blend genres inspired generations of musicians to look beyond rock's conventional boundaries. At number 15, it's Deep Purple, the band that helped define hard rock and proved that classical virtuosity and raw power could coexist beautifully. Their Mark II lineup owned the early 70s. Deep Purple in rock arrived in 1970, marking their shift from psychedelic rock to full-on hard rock assault. Ritchie Blackmore's guitar and John Lord's Hammond organ became weapons of mass destruction. Fireball followed in 1971, maintaining the intensity. Then came Machine Head in 1972, their commercial and artistic peak. Recorded in Montreux, Switzerland, it gave us Smoke on the Water, with possibly rock's most famous riff. But the album was much more than that one song. It showcased the band firing on all cylinders. Who Do We Think We Are in 1973 would be the Mark II lineup's final album, as tensions reached a breaking point. Ian Gillan and Roger Glover departed, replaced by David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes for Burn in 1974, and Stormbringer later that year. The sound shifted toward funk and soul influences. Blackmore's departure in 1975 brought Tommy Bolin for Come Taste the Band, their final album of the decade. It was a brave experiment that divided fans and marked the end of an era. Deep Purple's 70s run was about pure musicianship meeting raw energy. Their blend of classical influences, blues roots, and hard rock power influenced everyone from heavy metal to prog. They proved that virtuosity didn't have to be pretentious. Sometimes it just needed to rock really, really hard. At number 14, it's Rush, the Canadian power trio that transformed from Led Zeppelin wannabes into progressive rock titans within just a few albums. Their 70s journey is one of rock's greatest evolution stories. Their self-titled debut in 1974 was straight-ahead hard rock with original vocalists, but everything changed with Fly By Night in 1975. Neil Peart joined on drums, bringing not just incredible chops, but literary lyrics about trees, wizards, and individualism. Caress of Steel, later in 1975, went full prog with sidelong epics, nearly killing their career commercially. Then came 2112 in 1976, the album that saved them. The 20-minute title track about a dystopian future where music is banned became an anthem for misfits everywhere. It was their breakthrough, proving that uncompromising prog could find an audience. A Farewell to Kings in 1977 and Hemispheres in 1978 saw them at peak complexity. Hemispheres featured another sidelong epic and showcased the trio at their most virtuosic. Geddy Lee's bass and vocals, Alex Lifeson's guitar work, and Peart's drum theatrics were all firing on every cylinder. Rush proved that 3 guys could sound like 6, that prog rock could have a working-class edge, and that sincerity wasn't something to be ashamed of. They were nerdy, ambitious, and unafraid to write 20-minute songs about Greek mythology. Their influence on progressive metal and technical rock is immeasurable, and their 70s output remains the gold standard for power trio prog.
West is where all days.
At number 13, it's Graaf Generator, the band that made progressive rock sound genuinely apocalyptic. Led by Peter Hamill's intense vocals and featuring no guitar, they were prog's darkest corner. The Least We Can Do Is Wave to Each Other arrived in 1970, introducing their claustrophobic sound built around Hugh Banton's ominous organ work and David Jackson's frantic saxophones. H to He Who Am the Only One, later that year pushed further into existential dread. Pawn Hearts in 1971 is their masterpiece, particularly the sidelong epic that closes the album. This was prog rock as psychological horror, utterly unique and unforgettable. Then they split up, but like any good apocalyptic prophecy, they returned. Godbluff in 1975 announced their comeback with renewed intensity. Still Life and World Record both arrived in 1976, showing the band had lost none of their dark power during their hiatus. The Quiet Zone, The Pleasure Dome, came in 1977, their final album of the decade before another dissolution. It was slightly more accessible, but still unmistakably VDGG. Graaf Generator never achieved mainstream success, and frankly, their music was too confrontational for that anyway. While other prog bands explored fantasy and cosmic wonder, VDGG dealt with paranoia, mortality, and human frailty. They proved that progressive rock could be genuinely unsettling, not just complex, but emotionally challenging. Essential listening for anyone who thought prog was all whimsy and synthesizers. At number 12, it's Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the progressive rock power trio that proved three virtuosos could make more noise than most orchestras. They were prog at its most bombastic, excessive, and gloriously over the top. Their self-titled debut in 1970 immediately established their sound: Keith Emerson's keyboard pyrotechnics, Greg Lake's powerful vocals and bass, and Carl Palmer's precision drumming. Tarkus followed in 1971, featuring a 20-minute epic about a mechanical armadillo tank creature. Because why not? Trilogy in 1972 showed a more refined approach, while Brain Salad Surgery in 1973, with its H.R. Geiger artwork, gave us Carn Evil 9 and cemented their reputation for spectacular excess. This was prog rock as arena spectacle. Works Volume 1 arrived as a double album in 1977, giving each member a side for their solo work plus one full band side. It was ambitious but sprawling. Works Volume 2, later that year, collected leftovers and outtakes, feeling more like a contractual obligation. Then came Love Beach in 1979, universally panned as their weakest effort and recorded when the band was barely speaking to each other. Even die-hard fans struggle to defend this one. ELP defined keyboard-driven prog rock in the 70s. Emerson treated his Hammond organ and Moog synthesizer like weapons of mass destruction, while the trio's classical adaptations brought Mussorgsky and Copeland to rock audiences. They were divisive, pretentious, and absolutely essential to understanding 70s prog rock's ambitions and excesses. At number 11, it's Uriah Heep, the band that brought gothic drama to hard rock and somehow made Hammond organs sound menacing. They were massively successful in the 70s, even if critics never quite gave them their due. The journey began with Very Heavy, Very Humble in 1970, followed quickly by Salisbury later that year, which featured a 16-minute title track complete with orchestra. Look at Yourself in 1971 showcased their signature blend of heavy riffs and soaring vocals. Then came their golden period, Demons and Wizards, and The Magician's Birthday, both in 1972, are considered their finest work. These albums perfected their formula of fantasy-themed lyrics, Ken Hensley's swirling keyboards, and Mick Box's powerful guitar work. Sweet Freedom in 1973 and Wonderworld in 1974 continued their streak. though Sweet Freedom marked bassist Gary Thane's final album. Return to Fantasy in 1975 introduced John Wetton on bass, while High and Mighty in 1976 saw them pushing toward a harder sound. The decade's final years brought Firefly in 1977, Innocent Victim in 1977, Fallen Angel in 1978, and lineup changes that tested their stability. Despite the turbulence, they remained a formidable live act. Uriah Heep never achieved the critical acclaim of their peers, but they sold millions of albums and influenced countless heavy metal bands. Their combination of progressive ambition and hard rock power created something uniquely theatrical and undeniably heavy. At number 10, it's Led Zeppelin, the band that took blues, folk, and hard rock, threw them in a blender, and created something so powerful it still echoes today. While they'd already conquered the world by 1970, the decade ahead would cement their legend. Led Zeppelin's Fury arrived in 1970, surprising fans with its acoustic folk leanings. Critics were puzzled, but tracks like Immigrant Song proved they could still crush when needed. Then came the untitled fourth album in 1971. You know it as Led Zeppelin 4, or So. It featured a little song called Stairway to Heaven, which became the most played track in radio history. No big deal. Houses of the Holy in 1973 saw them experimenting with funk, reggae, and everything in between, showcasing their versatility. Physical Graffiti arrived as a double album in 1975, an embarrassment of riches featuring Kashmir and proving they had more great material than most bands could dream of. Presence in 1976 was darker and harder, recorded while Robert Plant recovered from a serious car accident. The urgency showed. In Through the Outdoor came in 1979, their final studio album with John Bonham, featuring more keyboards and a different sonic palette that divided fans. Led Zeppelin's 70s run was about constant evolution while maintaining their core power. They could write delicate acoustic ballads and bone-crushing riffs with equal mastery. Jimmy Page's guitar wizardry, Plant's vocals, John Paul Jones's versatility, and Bonham's thunderous drums created a chemistry that's never been replicated. They weren't progressive rock in the traditional sense, but their ambition, experimentation, and sheer scale influenced everyone, including every band on this list. At number 9, we have Kansas, the American prog rock warriors who proved you didn't need a British accent to master the genre. Armed with a violin and Midwestern determination, they brought progressive rock to the American heartland. Their self-titled debut dropped in 1974, immediately setting them apart with Kerry Livgren's complex compositions and Robbie Steinhardt's electric violin. Song for America followed in 1975, a more ambitious effort featuring the epic title track that showcased their growing confidence. Mask arrived later in 1975, but it was Left Overture in 1976 that changed everything. This album gave us Carry On Wayward Son, a radio-friendly prog anthem that proved complex music could be commercially successful. Suddenly, Kansas wasn't just a prog band, they were rock stars. Point of No Return in 1977 solidified their mainstream success, with the title track becoming another massive hit. They'd found the sweet spot between progressive sophistication and arena rock accessibility, no easy feat. Monolith arrived in 1979, showing them pushing into heavier, more experimental territory. Though it didn't match their previous commercial heights, it demonstrated their refusal to play it safe. Kansas brought something unique to progressive rock, an American perspective mixed with classical training and a willingness to rock hard. While British bands explored mythology and sci-fi, Kansas wrote about spiritual searching and existential questions with a distinctly American voice. They proved that prog rock wasn't just a British import. It could thrive anywhere musicians were willing to push boundaries. Kansas made complexity sound effortless and showed that you could fill arenas while still playing in 7/8 time. At number 8, it's Camel, the band that proved progressive rock could be elegant, melodic, and utterly beautiful without sacrificing complexity. They were the gentle giants of prog, if you will. The journey started with their self-titled debut in 1973, introducing their signature blend of jazz fusion and symphonic prog. Mirage followed in 1974, featuring lush soundscapes and Andrew Latimer's expressive guitar work that could make you weep. Then came The Snow Goose in 1975, an entirely instrumental concept album based on Paul Gallico's novella. No vocals, just pure musical storytelling. It was ambitious, risky, and absolutely gorgeous. Critics and fans alike fell in love with its cinematic scope. Moon Madness arrived in 1976, often considered their finest work. This album perfectly balanced accessibility with sophistication, giving us tracks that were both memorable and intricate. Rain Dances in 1977 continued their hot streak with a slightly jazzier edge. Breathless in 1978 saw the band experimenting with shorter, punchier songs, while I Can See Your House From Here in 1979 marked a significant shift. With former Caravan member Richard Sinclair joining, the album leaned more toward Canterbury scene quirky jazz rock, dividing longtime fans. Throughout the 70s, Camel carved out a unique space in progressive rock. They weren't as bombastic as Emerson, Lake and Palmer, as theatrical as Genesis, or as heavy as King Crimson. Instead, they offered something more refined, prog rock you could get lost in, music that painted pictures without needing words. Andrew Latimer's guitar became one of prog's most distinctive voices, singing melodies that stayed with you long after the album ended. At number 7, we have Gentle Giant, the band that looked at progressive rock's complexity and said, "Hold my medieval recorder." They were the musicians' musicians, the prog band that made other prog bands feel inadequate. The journey began with their self-titled debut in 1970, showcasing their ability to blend rock with classical, jazz, and medieval influences. Acquiring the Taste followed in 1971, an album title that doubled as fair warning. This wasn't easy listening. This was prog that demanded your full attention. Three Friends in 1972 told a concept story about childhood friends taking different life paths, while Octopus, later that year, is often considered their masterpiece. The multi-instrumental virtuosity on display was simply staggering. These guys could play literally anything. In a Glass House arrived in 1973, an album so experimental it confused even die-hard fans. The Power and the Glory in 1974 showed a slightly more accessible side, though accessible is relative when you're Gentle Giant. Free Hand in 1975 is arguably their most approachable album, followed by Interview in 1976, which featured innovative interview segments woven into the music. The Missing Piece in 1977 and Giant for a Day in 1978 showed a shift toward a more commercial sound that divided their fan base. Gentle Giant never achieved the mainstream success of Yes or Genesis, but their influence on progressive rock is immeasurable. They proved that complexity for complexity's sake could be beautiful. that medieval instruments belonged in rock, and that counterpoint wasn't just for Bach anymore. They were gloriously, unapologetically difficult, and that's exactly why we love them. At number 6, it's Black Sabbath, the band that literally invented heavy metal and spent the 70s proving that darkness, doom, and down-tuned guitars were exactly what rock music needed. It all started in 1970 with their self-titled debut, released on Friday the 13th because subtlety was never their thing. That opening tritone riff, The Devil's Interval, announced that something new and terrifying had arrived. Paranoid followed the same year, giving us the iconic title track and cementing their status as the heaviest band on the planet. Master of Reality in 1971 took things even heavier, while Volume 4 in 1972 showed they could experiment without losing their crushing edge. Sabbath Bloody Sabbath arrived in 1973, featuring keyboards and more complex arrangements that proved they weren't just about volume and darkness. Sabotage in 1975 had an angry, raw energy, partly because they were battling legal troubles with their management. Technical Ecstasy in 1976 saw them experimenting further, dividing fans but showing their ambition. Then came Never Say Die in 1978, Ozzy Osbourne's final album with the band during this era. It was less consistent than their earlier work, but still carried that signature Sabbath weight. What made Black Sabbath essential wasn't just Tony Iommi's mountain-moving riffs or Ozzy's haunting vocals. It was their willingness to explore darkness, occultism, war, and social issues when everyone else was singing about love and peace. They created a blueprint that every metal band since has followed. Black Sabbath didn't just make heavy music in the 70s. They defined what heavy meant. Without them, there's no metal as we know it. Simple as that. At number 5, we have Yes, the band that took progressive rock's complexity and somehow made it soaring, uplifting, and borderline spiritual. The 70s were their golden age, and they knew it. The decade opened with Time and a Word in 1970, featuring an orchestra that hinted at the grandeur to come. The Yes album arrived in 1971, introducing guitarist Steve Howe and finally giving the band their distinctive sound. Fragile followed later that year, featuring Rick Wakeman's keyboard wizardry and giving us the iconic Roundabout. The Roger Dean artwork alone became as legendary as the music. Then, in 1972, Yes released Close to the Edge. And quite frankly, the conversation about the greatest progressive rock album ever made begins and ends here. The 18-minute title track is a masterclass in composition, arrangement, and sheer ambition. Every section flows perfectly, building from delicate passages to explosive crescendos. John Anderson's ethereal vocals, Howe's intricate guitar work, Wakeman's cosmic keyboards, Chris Squire's melodic bass lines, and Bill Bruford's jazz-influenced drumming created something transcendent. This wasn't just an album, it was a religious experience disguised as prog rock. The double album, Tales from Topographic Oceans, arrived in 1973, 4 sidelong tracks inspired by Hindu scripture. Critics were divided, but the ambition was undeniable. After Wakeman's departure, Relayer came in 1974 with Patrick Moraz on keyboards, showcasing a jazzier, more aggressive sound. Following a brief hiatus, Yes returned with Going for the One in 1977, a more concise but still adventurous album. Tormato in 1978 continued this trend, though it's often considered their weakest 70s effort, which still means it's better than most bands' best work. Yes spent the 70s reaching for the stars and actually touching them. Their technical prowess, combined with an almost naive optimism, created music that was complex, yet accessible, cerebral, yet emotional. They proved that prog rock could make you think and feel simultaneously. At number 4, we have King Crimson, the band that basically invented progressive rock in 1969, and then spent the 70s reinventing themselves so many times that keeping track of the lineup changes required a spreadsheet. The decade opened with In the Wake of Poseidon in 1970, which, let's be honest, was essentially In the Court of the Crimson King Part 2. Critics called it derivative, but fans didn't care. Lizard followed later that year, a jazz fusion-influenced beast that saw Robert Fripp leading yet another new lineup. Islands came in 1971, a mellower, more atmospheric album that proved Crimson could do beauty as well as brutality. Then, silence. The band dissolved. But Fripp wasn't done. In 1972, he assembled an entirely new lineup and dropped Lark's Tongues in Aspect in 1973, a ferocious return that introduced the world to improvisation-heavy, angular prog that felt dangerous. This wasn't your friendly neighborhood prog rock. This was prog that could actually hurt you. Starless and Bible Black arrived in 1974, mixing studio recordings with live improvisations so seamlessly that fans couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Then came Red later that year, widely considered one of the heaviest albums of the decade and a blueprint for future math rock and metal bands. The title track's crushing riff could level buildings. And then, Fripp disbanded King Crimson again, because apparently, going out on top is a Fripp tradition. The rest of the 70s saw silence from Crimson until 1981. But those 6 albums from the decade, created by a revolving door of extraordinary musicians, including John Wetton, Bill Bruford, and David Cross, left an indelible mark on progressive rock. King Crimson didn't just push boundaries in the 70s, they redrew the map entirely. They proved that prog could be aggressive, improvisational, and genuinely experimental. While other bands were making rock operas about hobbits, Crimson was creating sonic violence that still sounds ahead of its time. They were the band's band, the musicians that other musicians studied obsessively. At number 3, it's Jethro Tull, the band that convinced millions of rock fans that the flute could be just as badass as a guitar. Led by the iconic Ian Anderson, standing on one leg while shredding on his flute, Tull owned the 70s. The decade opened with Benefit in 1970, showcasing their blues rock roots before things got properly interesting. Aqualung arrived in 1971, their commercial breakthrough that gave us the unforgettable title track and raised questions about religion that made some radio stations nervous. Then came Thick as a Brick in 1972, a single, 43-minute song presented as a concept album about a fictional child poet. The album came with a full newspaper, because why not go completely over the top? A Passion Play followed in 1973, another single-track album that critics savaged, but fans loved anyway. Tull pivoted with War Child in 1974, and the folk-influenced Minstrel in the Gallery in 1975, showing their versatility. Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die arrived in 1976, an album about aging rockers that felt ironically self-aware. Songs from the Wood in 1977 embraced British folk traditions fully, followed by the darker Heavy Horses in 1978, which somehow made farming equipment sound epic. The folk trilogy concluded with Stormwatch in 1979, a moodier affair that closed their most creative decade. Throughout these 10 albums, Jethro Tull refused to be pigeonholed. Progressive rock, folk rock, Hard rock? Yes, yes, and yes. They mixed medieval madrigals with electric guitars, wrote concept albums about imaginary poets, and made the flute a legitimate rock instrument. Ian Anderson's wild stage presence, combined with the band's musical sophistication and refusal to take themselves too seriously, made Jethro Tull one of the 70s most distinctive acts. They proved you could be cerebral and accessible, complex and catchy, all while standing on one leg. At number 2, we have Genesis, the British prog rock titans who spent the 70s proving that rock music could be as theatrical as it was musical, and that a drummer could absolutely become a superstar frontman. The decade began with Trespass in 1970, but Genesis truly hit their stride with Nursery Crime in 1971. Introducing the world to the bizarre tale of a croquet-playing giant in the musical box. Because nothing says progressive rock, quite like a Victorian horror story set to a 10-minute epic. Foxtrot arrived in 1972, featuring the 23-minute masterpiece, Supper's Ready. A song that takes listeners through biblical imagery, surreal landscapes, and enough time signatures to make your head spin. Then came Selling England by the Pound in 1973, arguably their finest hour. This album perfectly balanced complex arrangements with genuine emotion, giving us classics like Firth of Fifth and The Cinema Show. Peter Gabriel's theatrical performances, complete with elaborate costumes and fox heads, made their live shows legendary. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway in 1974 was Gabriel's swan song with the band, a dystopian double album concept about a Puerto Rican street kid named Rael. It was ambitious, bizarre, and quintessentially Genesis. Then came the plot twist nobody saw coming. Drummer Phil Collins stepped up as lead vocalist. Skeptics predicted disaster, but a trick of the tail in 1976 proved them spectacularly wrong. Genesis didn't just survive, they evolved. Wind and Wuthering followed in 1976, and after guitarist Steve Hackett's departure, the trio of Collins, Tony Banks, and Mike Rutherford released And Then There Were Three in 1978, marking a subtle shift toward more accessible songwriting while maintaining their prog foundation. Genesis spent the 70s as prog rock royalty, delivering consistently brilliant albums that showcased their technical mastery and creative ambition, proving they could weather lineup changes without losing their musical identity. Taking the top spot on our list is Pink Floyd, the undisputed architects of psychedelic and progressive rock, who transformed the 1970s into their personal sonic playground. The decade kicked off with Atom Heart Mother in 1970, featuring a 23-minute title track complete with a choir and orchestra, because apparently regular rock songs were just too short. But Pink Floyd was just warming up. The introspective Metal followed in 1971, giving us the epic Echoes. In 1972, they released Obscured by Clouds, a soundtrack album that, let's be honest, often gets lost in the shuffle of their legendary discography. It's the album even die-hard fans sometimes forget exists. Then in 1973, they dropped The Dark Side of the Moon, an album that basically refused to leave the Billboard charts for 14 years. 14 years, that's longer than most bands' entire careers. This masterpiece explored themes of greed, time, death, and mental illness, all wrapped in pristine production and those signature Floyd soundscapes. Wish You Were Here came in 1975, a tribute to former bandmate Syd Barrett, that showcased their ability to blend emotional depth with sonic experimentation. The album's critique of the music industry proved they could bite the hand that fed them while simultaneously creating unforgettable music. In 1977, they unleashed Animals, a scathing concept album inspired by Orwell's Animal Farm. Roger Waters' increasingly dominant vision painted humanity as dogs, pigs, and sheep, subtle as a flying pig over Battersea Power Station, which became the album's iconic cover image. The decade closed with The Wall in 1979, a double album that became one of the best-selling records of all time. This rock opera about isolation and madness spawned a film, theatrical productions, and endless debates about whether it's genius or gloriously over the top. Spoiler, it's both. Pink Floyd didn't just make albums in the 70s. They created immersive experiences that pushed rock music into uncharted territories. Their combination of philosophical lyrics, innovative studio techniques, and spectacular live shows set a standard that bands are still chasing today. And there you have it, our top 20 rock bands of the 1970s, ranked by the quality of their studio albums from that incredible decade. Now, if you've made it this far, you clearly share our passion for music. And for that, we're grateful. If you enjoyed this ranking, hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and let us know in the comments. Did we get it right? Who should have been higher? Who did we criminally underrate? Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.